Thank you very much, Carol. Look, on the PLS issue, I have some sympathy with where Deputy Kenny is coming from. At the end of the day, if we're to change the speed limits in urban areas, if we're to change the speed limits in the way that you quite rightly want to change them, it's not going to happen inside 6 months. It's certainly not going to make a difference between now and Christmas, and I think it's disingenuous to suggest that. At the end of the day, speed limits are, and you're 100% correct in your view, that people see a speed limit and that's the target. I gotta get to 120 here. And I've driven on rural roads in Ireland where the speed limit was 80 kilometres, and the next thing it goes up to 100 kilometres, and you head for the 100 kilometres. The next thing you're into a series of U-bends, still at 100 kilometres an hour. So there needs to be a review of, when do we move from 80 to 100? When is it safe to do that? The other thing, and the chairman adverted to it, one of the things that drives me insane is driving down the Stillorgan dual carriageway and seeing a speed truck at Stillorgan. The number of people who are caught, I would say, is minimal. Yet I can drive rural roads in West Galway, in Donegal. You'll know, as a senator, we drive in rural roads quite a lot. And I have yet to see a significant number of speed traps on rural roads anywhere. And I've driven on roads in some parts of the country where I was taking my life in my hands only to be overtaken by somebody travelling at maybe 100 kilometres, I don't know. I was certainly driving much slower, so I have a difficulty with that. So even if we were to waive privilege right now, you're still going to have difficulty getting local authorities to re-badge the roads. You're still going to have difficulty of getting local authorities to agree that a stretch of road, say, between two different local authorities is capped at 80 kilometres or capped at 100 kilometres. So the guidelines that are going to have to be laid down are going to have to be really important. The other one is motorways. I've seen more speed checks on motorways than I have seen on rural roads. There's something terribly wrong about that. There is a tendency to treat it as a fishbowl, just sit there on the motorway and pick them off one by one, whereas in actual fact we should be out on the secondary roads around the country. The issue of farm vehicles on rural roads. I spoke on this during the summer. We get farm fatalities all of the time because of young people driving tractors. Minister, the tractors we have today and the tractors we had 20 years ago are very different machines. They're enormous machines with huge capacity, massive horsepower. And we see 16-year-old kids driving them. They're not supposed to be on the road, but they're on the road. There is absolutely zero requirement to drive a tractor. You can drive a tractor on the family farm and there's no requirement whatsoever. And during busy times of the year when silage is being collected and various other things, you see young children driving these massive tractors. I want to take issue with the story behind young male drivers. I remember when my son was in his teens and was learning to drive, he and his friends were absolutely opposed to the notion that anybody would drive having alcohol, even the following morning. They had a much more appreciative view of the rules of the road than I would have had at that age, for example. So I'm not so sure that young male drivers are all wrong. There's certainly some evidence there, but I'm not so sure that they all are. Now, uninsured drivers. If I'm uninsured, chances are I'm not going to obey any other rule of the road either. And if I'm taking drugs, the chances are I couldn't give a continental damn about other rules of the road. And if I'm drinking and driving, I'm certainly not going to be too pushed about speed limits. So I'm suggesting to you, Minister, today, if somebody is caught driving over a particular speed, is caught under the influence of drugs or under the influence of alcohol or uninsured, the vehicle should be taken from them and should be crushed. It should be sent to the local scrapyard and destroyed, because if you don't have a vehicle, you can't drive over the speed limit, you can't drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs. So I actually believe we should be far less tolerant. You crush one or two cars in a village or a town, and I guarantee you people will start to become an awful lot more compliant with the rules of the road. The issue of cycling. I once criticised a cyclist for crashing a red light that I was sitting at. He was beside me and he crashed the red light and took off. And I was challenged to cycle around Dublin, and I did. And I have to say it's a very dangerous occupation. The one surprise that I found was that HGV drivers and bus drivers were far more aware of me on a bicycle than car drivers. Car drivers seemed to feel that they had to win the race at the traffic lights and get out ahead of me. So I think we need to look at our traffic lighting system. You have it in some places, you don't have in others, that will allow the cyclist maybe 30 seconds to get past a junction before a car can move off. And that's something we need to look at. The other thing, Minister, it's slightly outside this conversation, but
we all have 10 minutes per slot, and you've used 7 of them on your speech, and I want to give the Minister a chance to come back in to respond to you as well.
So just give me the last thing, if you don't mind. The issue of public transport. There is a request from Cork and Galway to introduce light electric rail, and I think that's something we should do for both cities. It shouldn't be something we'd be talking about, it's something we should be doing. I know there's a preoccupation in Galway about the ring road, and I know the problems that the ring road has caused. I actually support an integrated ring road and light rail system for Galway. I think it's the only solution there, and I know Cork have a very strong view of that. So let's hope that this is not window dressing. I'm sympathetic to your need to do away with PLS, but at the same time I'm sympathetic to what Deputy Kenny has said today. Let's not throw the child out with the bathwater. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks very much, Senator Craughwell. And just to your point on the, I suppose, on timing, and I know you mentioned this to slower and dual carriageway and local authorities with speed limits. The challenge is we have to change the legislation before the process can commence with local authorities. So the longer this goes on in here and in the broader Oireachtas, the further away the review process will commence, and it will take a significant number of months, even in the best case scenario, for local authorities to do an assessment and then to change the limits in different areas. So that's going to take a significant number of months anyway, but that process can't even commence without changing the underpinning legislation, which is the default limits, and we plan to have the guidance ready in Q1 of next year, and I suppose that's why we are trying to progress this as a matter of priority. And it has an impact on the other sequential timelines, which we're trying to synchronise in this speed limit review. On the issue of, unfortunately, the figures this year are shocking, and to your point on young male drivers, the figures point to that. 78% of fatalities are male this year. 49% of overall fatalities are aged under 35 or under, and then 14% of fatalities are between 60 and 20. So when you combine that with what we know, and we know from the Gardaí that the 2015 to 29 toxicology evidence, 37% of driver fatalities had a positive toxicology for alcohol, 13% of driver fatalities had a positive toxicology for cocaine, and 7% for cannabis. And when you see the increased numbers of detections, even since that coronial data, toxicology data was collated, that unfortunately we're still seeing very worrying driver behaviour. And on your point of, I welcome the fact that the NTA with local authorities are installing, safer traffic lights to facilitate cyclists moving first. That's been introduced in many urban parts of the city. And on your point of light rail, as you know, the NTA are examining the designs for Cork on the basis of council feedback. And a preferred route is expected to go to consultation in the coming months. And Galway they're progressing a new transport strategy, and obviously there's a combined focus here. Number one, to it's congested and obviously we have a lot of feedback relating to the ring road, but people within Galway and in the county also want better options on public transport, rail and bus too. So appreciate your feedback on that.
On the issue of crushing vehicles.
Well, look,
Maybe confiscating them and selling to somebody else.
No, I'd confiscate them and crush them and make the sons that owned it watch it being crushed.
Not environmentally friendly, I would have thought, Senator Craughwell.
It's not a look. I said that's.
They do it in some places.
Well, maybe you can present some evidence of where they do it elsewhere.
I'll do that.
But
You'd be a very brave minister.
Look, we have unfortunately, and like this is presented in the data, there's a cohort and percentage of people that are just completely reckless, that have a total disregard for fellow citizens and for society around them, and I think they should face greater consequences. But I'm not sure. What you've suggested.
See your SUV 50 grand's worth being crushed.
But look, we need to make sure though that I think one way we are addressing recklessness in this legislation is through multiple behaviours in the one act being facing a penalty points consequence, and that I think will make a difference for those that are reckless on our roads.
But you would accept that a lot of guys who are banned from driving are actually caught subsequently driving, and they're caught without insurance.
Okay, time, Senator.
Okay.